Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salat wa salam ala Rasulullah. Welcome to the Dhul Hijjah project day 4, the topic being anxiety. And yes, we're in a bit of a different environment today. Unfortunately, I was unable to do the live session in Zoom with everyone, and so I am recording this in the Back to the Fitra office. There's our office. Ta-da! And the topic, when the anxiety just won't stop, how to find inner peace and contentment despite the constant fear and anxiety running through your veins. Is it possible? It is possible, right? And this session will unpack it more. Make sure you listen through to the end, inshallah. So all the way through this series, you will notice there's a bit of a theme, and it's a theme about thought and how thought works. Well, just like we're feeling our anger through angry thoughts, and just like yesterday we talked about stress and overwhelm, coming from that overthinking and not seeing the tawakkul in the situation, which sort of then leads to what the solution is to see the tawakkul. Well, anxious thinking or anxiety is in fact similar to what we talked about yesterday, except that in fact we're hanging on to it. We're really focusing in on it. And so I'm going to do a bit of a demo while I talk to you. So I'll step back a bit so you can see. I've got here my drink bottle. It's full of water, about a litre or so here. And hopefully as I step back, you can still hear me. I'm going to just hold this out in front of me like this. Okay. And if I just hold it for a moment and then put it down, just like having a normal thought and feeling, it really isn't a bother, right? What I'm going to do now is while I'm talking to you, I'm going to continue to hold it out the front here. And this is going to replicate in a physical, metaphorical way what anxiety, which then eventually perhaps leads to anxiety or panic attack attacks, is actually all about. And what you'll probably find is that as I'm talking to you, I'm going to get more and more distracted from what I'm saying, because more and more of my attention is going to be going into holding this up. Because what I can tell you right now is I'm starting to feel it here, and I can feel my muscles all tensing up to actually continue to hold it. And that's essentially what happens when we hold on to anxious thoughts. If we get preoccupied or focus on anxious thoughts, is that we get tense, and that tension runs through us, not just emotionally, but also physiologically, like I'm experiencing now with the drink bottle. And the longer we hang on to and focus on to that type of thinking, the more it's causing tension. Like right now, my whole arm is now starting to ache and it's feeling a bit wobbly. And I'm also feeling it harder for me to concentrate on what I'm saying to you, because more and more of my attention is going on to trying to keep this up and not let it go, right? And I'm completely starting to lose my train of thought because my attention is now so focused on keeping this drink bottle up, because now my whole arm is starting to ache right the way up to my shoulder, and I can feel the tension now in my lower back as other muscles are kicking in to hold it up. So I'm not going to be able to finish this continuing to hold this, because now I'm completely preoccupied with holding it up. So I'm going to actually just put the bottle down. Oh, that's a relief. Now I can come closer and speak to you more clearly. So I just shake it out. Oh, sorry, I'm wiggling the whole camera doing that. Get my thinking back. So did you see that in action? And this is really what happens when we focus in on something within an anxious, worried way, and we continue remaining focused on it. It's like the experience of holding the drink bottle. It preoccupies us. It actually starts to overwhelm even everything, like becomes our entire focus. We're unable to focus on other things, able to concentrate. In fact, I'm still feeling lots of my muscles complaining from having done that. Give it a go, try it, and just notice how it gradually grows. And that's essentially what's happening. And that's why you can get physiological symptoms with anxiety, is because, in fact, as you are holding on to that thinking, there are different chemicals that are releasing through your body, often adrenaline, cortisol, and these types of hormones, for instance, they're meant to play a role, but they're not meant to be constantly circulating in our body. And in this life where we're so anxious and stressed about so many things, they are circulating in our body more than we're designed for. And so it's having a ripple effect through our hormones in our body, causing all sorts of things, including some things that you may feel are completely unrelated. But from what I understand, cortisol is like the kingpin of hormones. It disrupts every hormone in our body. And so we can be affected in so many different ways physiologically. And in fact, one of our beautiful graduates from the certification program coined the physical responses, especially when you get a panic attack, when it goes to that stage of an anxiety or panic attack where you can't breathe, you've got tingling in your fingers and all sorts of other types of physiological symptoms going on, labeled that thoughts with special effects. And that label in itself is very helpful, because it's basically helping us see, well, it's still thought, it's still coming from thought. And the reason that's important is because it means that nothing has to change other than the way we're looking at it for us to be better, because everything else is out of our control, right? So that's actually a hopeful thing. And secondly, it takes us away from panicking even more and having even more thinking and more anxiety around the physiological symptoms that we're experiencing, because we realize they're just the special effects of thought. And when we shift the way we think, then those special effects will also rectify as well. So it takes a lot of worry off, because what tends to happen is when we start getting physiological symptoms in our body, is then it adds new levels of worry. And the thing is, if we continue down this path, it can reach a point where we end up with some serious conditions. And, being someone who has been through many, many years of domestic abuse, for example, where I was walking on eggshells constantly, day in, day out, I still have 20 years later certain physiological things that I am still trying to sort out, that are related to my body having been switched on constantly with cortisol. In fact, my adrenals have sort of got out of whack and don't seem to be able to calm down to a normal, regular pattern. And I don't see that as stored trauma or any of those sorts of things that are out there. I just see that as an imbalance that has been happening for a while. So it takes conscious effort in looking at things physiologically to get the balance back, which is what our body and our mind and our soul really wants, is to come back to that innate state. So let's get back to the emotional part, because I really wasn't here to teach you about the physiological part, but I think it's important to address it, because a lot of people add another layer of thinking around what's going on with them physiologically that then holds them back from letting go of the thinking or switching the way they're seeing it. So I'm hoping that just sharing that little bit about the physiological side may be enough to switch your thinking around that element of it, that may actually bring down the severity of those responses. Or it may be that when that happens, you recover from it much quicker, because you understand now not to panic about it. So let's get back to thought. What everyone always says, well, what do I do? It's not about doing, it's just about understanding. And gradually, as we understand more, we stop taking things quite so seriously. When we stop taking things quite so seriously, we don't focus in on them. And so when we don't focus in on them for so long, we notice ourselves doing it and we realize we have a choice in that moment to not go down that path. And eventually we start even thinking about it differently so that it no longer causes us stress and anxiety. And so simply, just like I did with this bottle, it's simply, like we put it down. We put the thinking down. And you might say, well, I don't know how to do that. That doesn't seem possible. So there is a possibility there, and believing that there's a possibility there is the first step, because if you don't believe it's possible, then you're not going to look for it consciously or subconsciously. You're going to continue down the path of believing that this is the way you are and this is the way it's going to be. And I don't want that for you. I want you to have a more hopeful life that's free from this anxiety, come back to a state of inner peace. Now, I was somebody, just so you know, I was somebody who suffered from anxiety attacks. At the time, they diagnosed me with asthma, and they gave me all this asthma medication and couldn't work out why it was that I wasn't getting any better from asthma. I've come to realize, because I don't tend to suffer from asthma anymore, and asthma isn't something that you don't suffer from anymore, you either have it or you don't, apparently, that probably the breathing issues I was having was actually anxiety, that I'd reached that level of being on guard so much constantly, day in, day out, for 9 years in this marriage, that I couldn't breathe anymore. Like physiologically, I was experiencing what I was experiencing emotionally and spiritually, which was suffocation. I was feeling suffocated in my life. And so I was actually experiencing a sense of suffocation also physiologically. So I do get it, and I do understand, and I don't live life like that anymore. And I still get tested and challenged. It's not like I suddenly have lived on easy street and that's why I don't have anything to stress about. There is constantly tests and challenges coming through, but I don't have that same experience of them anymore, and that is possible for you too. And while I appreciate that what I share with you today may not be enough to get you there, I'd like you to know that that's the whole reason for the Peaceful Hearts transformation, which I am working on to announce for you very soon, for you to join so that you can go on the journey of getting there, inshallah. So if this is something that you're really struggling with, I highly encourage you to consider joining the Peaceful Hearts transformation when I release it sometime this week, inshallah, so that you can go from that space of anxiety where you do feel like, I don't even know what's the words. It's just overwhelming, isn't it? It's like, I can understand why we get to the point of panic, because it's like, I really don't know what to do anymore. It's out of my control, and it's scary. There's a lot of fear there. And so just like when we were talking about anger, we were saying, it comes from most likely thinking that's around injustice. Anxiety is generally fearful thinking. And it's usually fearful thinking about the unknown. So the unknown might be of the future. A lot of anxiety is around what's going to happen in the future. A lot of anxiety is around not knowing what's happening right now in a place where you can't see. So I could give you an example. I'm pretty sure that families, because I've heard them talk about this, who have family members in Gaza, when they don't pick up the phone, have quite a lot of anxious, stressful thinking about what does that mean. So that's a kind of a fear of it's unknown because they didn't answer the phone, whether they're still alive or not. That's one example. Fear of the future, I mean, anxiety and stress around our marriage or our children can be around, I'm not quite sure what's going to happen with this, and getting to the point that we're really stressed and anxious about it. Now, just like everything else I've shared with you, the solution is husnul dhan billah, having good thinking of Allah, and really putting our trust in the words of Allah in the Quran. First of all, where he says he will not burden us with more than we can bear. So that includes everything that is going to happen as well. So we can understand that while we may apply that to what's happening right now, it also applies to what's going to happen. Whatever it is, we are going to be able to bear it. And it's through remembering Allah in that way that we find peace. And that's what he says, in the remembrance of Allah, the hearts find peace. And another couple of verses that are very helpful are in Surah At-Talaq, verses 2 and 3, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, whoever is conscious, mindful of Allah, that he will find a way out for them from every difficulty and will provide for them from means they could not imagine. And whoever puts their trust in Allah, Allah is sufficient for them. That again is also the solution. It just means that as long as we remain conscious and aware of Allah, that we're living our life in the best way we can for the sake of Allah, doing the best we can for the sake of Allah to avoid doing what displeases Him and doing as much as we can of what pleases Him, then whatever difficulty we find ourselves in, or whatever difficulty we are going to find ourselves in, that Allah is the one who will find a way out for us. And just because we can't see the answer, He has said, and can provide from means we could not imagine. Meaning that just because we can't think about it, just because we can't figure it out up here, doesn't mean that there isn't a solution. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can open that door for us at any point in time. And my experience has been that when I trust that and I make passionate dua to Allah, it's so true every single time. Which brings to the last bit where it says, and whoever puts their trust in Allah, Allah is sufficient for them. Which, you know, that's where the true ease and peace comes from, is when you hand it over to Allah, realizing that without Allah, we are nothing. Without Allah, we can't get through any of this. Truly submitting to that, then we feel at peace and Allah becomes sufficient for us. We don't need anything else. And we don't need to hang on to that thinking. We can put the drink bottle down. My muscles feel much better now. I feel much calmer now. I don't feel the pain in my back anymore from holding the drink bottle. I feel relaxed and at peace. And that's the same when we put down the thinking. And that is the answer to anxious thinking to the point of, you know, anxiety attacks or panic attacks. You too can have inner peace and be free from it through a change in the way you think about it, inshallah. So on that note, I'd love you to share your takeaways and your questions below. And I look forward to seeing you in tomorrow's session, inshallah. I can't tell you off the top of my head what the topic is today, I'm sorry. You'll just have to go and look at the calendar and see for yourself. And just look out for the announcement about the Peaceful Hearts transformation, because if you are going through this, I want to help you to get out of it and enjoy your life as I enjoy mine. Alhamdulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.